Hello, everybody. Thanks for waiting for a few minutes. Sorry for the delay. But thank you so much for tuning in today. We're very excited for the Hangout of today. I'm focusing on AdSense and getting started with AdSense. My name is David Stanaka. I'm the Senior Partner Manager for AdSense in Sub-Saharan Africa. And today I have with me my colleague Oisin, who is from the Partner Engagement team here in Dublin. And also tuned in all the way from India is our colleague Raj, who's the AdSense Specialist and Partner Manager there, and who will be assisting us as well later on when it comes to the Q&A. So if there are any specific questions on this, feel free. You saw the link, I think, earlier already. Please continue to submit your questions. We're going to try and go through as many as we can at the end of this presentation. So yeah, feel free to if anything is unclear, maybe during the presentation as well, feel free to submit your questions there, and we'll try and answer them. But I would say for now, let's get started. We have a lot to cover today, some exciting topics. Hopefully answering a lot of your questions already. So I would say let's just get started right away.
Yeah.
So today's topic, of course, as you know, is on all around AdSense. And you know, we hope that for those of you who have tuned in, you're either, of course, interested in AdSense because you haven't used it yet, but you have an exciting website or an exciting app you want to monetize. Maybe you are part of an agency who wants to learn more about the opportunities to use AdSense as part of your business models, or you're just generally interested because you may be interested in the tech world and industry and you just want to learn more about it. So those are sort of the target audience, if you were to say, for today. So the three major topics today is, as I said before, focusing on the Q&A at the end, but the two main topics actually today. We're talking about audience engagement. So we also want to try and give you a few pointers, if you want, or best practices on how to best engage your audience, which ultimately, of course, would also determine your success on AdSense. And then secondly, the second half of the presentation is going to focus on the actual product. So on AdSense, how to get started, how to register your account, what is required to register your account, what are the first steps after registering, and then also we're going to go through a couple of best practices within AdSense, sort of how to optimize your ads once they're actually live on your site. And then, yeah, as mentioned before, we're going to have a live Q&A at the very end to hopefully answer those questions that the presentation hasn't already answered.
Great. Yeah, I'm really excited. Let's get started.
So just to give a sort of set the scene, to also, I think sometimes it's easy to forget that, you know, all of us here now obviously are working on the publishing side, but for Google, of course, and the way we approach a lot of the difficult questions, I guess, and product features and so on, is obviously from an overall advertising ecosystem. So what you always have to keep in mind that we have to think about not just you as a publisher, but we also have to think, of course, very heavily about the advertisers. So what are their interests? And most importantly, of course, for us, the user is always in the center. So a lot of the questions you might have, you know, try to step back and really think about, okay, what might the users think? How do users look at this, and also how do the advertisers think about certain questions? So this is obviously our approach where we come from. We have to think of all three at the same time, the entire ecosystem, and AdSense is obviously one part of that. But yeah, that triangle, of course, influences a lot of the decisions and elements we have within AdSense.
Great, thanks, David. So we're going to get going with some really good tips that'll help you build good traffic to your site. So we really hope that you can take these on board today and implement some of them on your site, whichever ones you see fit. It might depend on the kind of site that you're running, whether it's a fashion blog or food recipes or anything like that. So yeah, let's get started. So the first thing we're gonna look at is relate to your users' interests. So this is absolutely key. Your site wouldn't exist without your users. That's who you're creating content for. That's who you're trying to engage every single day, whether it's through social media or through live events. So relating to your users' interests is absolutely key. So it's not enough to know just who your users are and how they're digesting your content. You need to know what they want to see and where they want to see it. So this both relates to the contents that they want and who the users actually are. So you want to understand your audience and you want to create great content that they really want to engage with, because ultimately that's what's going to, you know, provide value to your users in the long term. So here's a couple of questions for you to think about for your own site. First of all, how many users are visiting your site? This might be, you know, weekly, monthly, daily. It really depends on the kind of site you have. It really depends maybe how big you are. If you're experiencing hundreds of thousands of page views a week, you might not be looking at a granular level by day. How often are users visiting your site? You want to know, are users coming back to your site, or are people just landing here once, consuming a piece of content, and then they never return again? Which of your posts are most popular? Was the how-to guide the most popular, or when I wrote a product review complaining about a product I didn't like, did that drive a lot of engagement? Which search terms visitors use to find you? So this is really key. Obviously, a lot of traffic going to everybody's site is coming from direct traffic from search engines such as Google. And what are people looking for when they actually find you? This is really important for your search engine optimization. And then where are users actually coming from? So if I'm running a site in Nigeria, for example, are all my visitors in Nigeria, or are some of them coming from Kenya, or are some of them coming from Europe, the US? It's really important to understand these factors that are driving people to your site.
Absolutely.
So the tool that we use, and the tool that most of our publishers, and I'm sure you'll agree, you're constantly talking to publishers about this, is Google Analytics.
Yeah. So
Google Analytics is a free web analytics platform that records and reports visits to your website. It's completely free to set up. And we're going to take you through the four best things you can do to get the absolute most out of Google Analytics. So there you have it there. Google Analytics is a free web analytics platform that records and reports visits to your website. So we've got 4 tips today. Anyone who's watching live, we're going to share the deck with you afterwards. So you have all the links to go to sign up or to read more included in the resources that we send you. So the first piece is dashboards. So every site's different. Every site's completely different. What you want to know, just like I was talking about earlier, returning visitors, whether you want to look at it by region, all these kinds of things are very specific to your site. So there's a way that you can build custom reports in dashboards that relate exactly to your site and the kind of questions that you want to answer. The second part is location. So you really want to understand where your users are coming from.
Yeah.
And this is especially actually important for a lot of the new markets that are growing their sites these days. You might have a lot of expatriates. You might have people consuming your content who are from the country that you're in, but they're living somewhere else. So that kind of content might be slightly different to the kind of content you might write for users that are living in your region. The third part is, this goes without saying, device type. So we all know that a lot of traffic is coming from mobile on everybody's site. It's a challenge, of course. It's a challenge. You've got to make sure your site's mobile optimized. Google Analytics can tell you what percentage of your site is, what percentage of your site's visitors are coming from mobile, desktop, tablet, even down to the granularity, what browser they're using, what operating system they're using. So you can really tailor your content for that. The fourth one is uncovering your best and worst content. So you spend all this time writing your content, producing a how-to video, shooting images, everything like this, and you put it out there. And how do you know that people are engaging with it? How can you be sure that people are engaging with the content you're putting out there? And which is the most engaging content? If you're finding that your food recipes are getting a lot more page views than your product reviews of different ingredients that you use, you want to start gearing towards that content, or you might want to start improving the latter if it's not performing that well. You can go into a lot of granularity, how many people are viewing, how long they're spending the site, what parts they're engaging with. You can even set up events to see, okay, which articles are driving people to subscribe to my newsletter. it really depends on what you're trying to give to your users and what you want them to do on your site. So the next part is diversify your content strategy. So the first part was relating to your users' interests, and now we're going to go through a few tips on diversifying your content strategy.
Exactly.
So David, you're going to talk a bit about this now, I think.
Yes, absolutely. So I think the first part here is the different types of content, of course, that you can put out as a publisher, and that also you have to be aware of what your users are actually interested in. So we have those sort of evergreen content, what we call it, like content that will always be relevant. Like this is, for example, things relating to if you're, let's say, like a sort of news, gossip, entertainment side, like relationship advice, or sports news. These are stories that will always be read again. And they always make sense, of course. It's obviously much more difficult to get traction on those because it is a long-term, very keyword-heavy, a lot of competition, of course, because by the nature of being evergreens, everybody writes about them. But of course, they could also be very important to have in your site. So that's sort of the first category of what type of content you can provide. The second one then being obviously the opposite, basically, the very trendy content. So sort of who's the first to break the story, especially now important for news publishers. And then there are a couple of tools, again, that can obviously help you as well, other than maybe what you already know in your market, but you can be sure as soon as you know, somebody else will have heard about it already, right? So it's very difficult to really be the first. But we have the Google Trends tool. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. Again, if you have the presentation, you can actually click on the link here, which can basically give you an idea of certain keywords or basically certain trends on Google search that are happening per country over any given period of time. If you want to find out which keywords maybe are increasing in terms of relevance in a given country, there might be special events happening in a country, like elections or sport events, looking at the Football European Championships now, for example, coming up, I think in 2 weeks. So those two can give you a little bit of insights on what might be the trending topics in your country that you should be writing about.
David, I was fascinated when I saw this graph here on Google Trends when I searched for college courses.
Yeah.
So if I were a website writing about college courses, college choices, this kind of thing, looking at three of the largest countries in the world, India, Nigeria, United States, college courses is a search term that peaks at different times of the year.
Yeah.
And it's very, very obvious year on year when it's going to peak.
Right.
So you can see in June, everybody in India is searching for college courses.
Right.
Everybody's applying. In Nigeria, it seems to be January, February. So,
right.
And the United States doesn't seem to be much change up and down throughout the whole year. Everyone's interested in college.
Right.
So this is the kind of thing that can really give you insights into when you should be bringing out certain types of trending content.
Absolutely.
And then maybe the rest of the year you might be focusing on evergreen content, and you really want to be on time with that trending content.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's a very useful tool. Now, the next important step when it comes to audience engagement is, of course, the ease of use for users. We all know this, especially in emerging markets. User behavior is changing, number one, but it's changing everywhere. But it's also actually quite different to a lot of the developed markets. So the big, of course, elephant in the room for emerging markets is mobile. And we all know this. Oshin had already mentioned it earlier as well. The majority of users, and I think for most of you this will be the case, are accessing your website, your app. Well, if it's an app, it's obviously, but via the mobile phone. And we did a couple of sort of research on this, of course, and about 61% said actually they will leave any site, even if it's a well-known site, if they don't actually see what they're looking for right away. And this could be either because the site isn't loaded, or of course just because the content is relevant or not what they expected, right? So ease of use, especially on a mobile screen, is very difficult because it's much smaller. It needs to be very clear what you can do on the site. Touch-friendly, remember, like, you don't want to be zooming in and out of a mobile site. And also font size, of course, again, it's very hard, for example, in this example here now, this is obviously a very bad experience. Nobody wants to zoom in to read an article on a mobile page. You want it to be in front of you, easy to read, and also in terms of navigation, it needs to be very, very easy to use for you. So continuing with the mobile sort of topic, the question we asked some of our users was, how often do you encounter issues to access websites via smartphones? And this gives you an idea in terms of countries. So Nigeria, about 61% actually said that they have issues sometimes using accessing websites using their smartphones. 44 in Kenya, 27 in India, and 35 in North America. So this gives you a little bit of an indication on where maybe a lot of the publishers still have a lot of work to do, but it's absolutely crucial. If you want to be successful with AdSense, with monetization, but also, of course, with overall your online traffic, you need to be fully mobile optimized. And this is not just the design, not just the layout, it's also speed and content as well. Because our most successful publishers go as far as actually changing the type of content they show to mobile users versus desktop. Because you have to understand in which situations do users go to your site when they're on the mobile phone and when they're on the tablet or desktop. They might be interested in different things. Mobile is mostly short, maybe quicker, they don't have as much time, they might be on the way to work, and then versus desktop where they might be sitting at home or at work where they have a bit more time. So you really have to think about this very carefully. And yeah, so again, Google, as you know, provides several free tools to you. A few of them we've already mentioned with Google Trends. Now the next thing is actually this mobile-friendly tool from the Google developers site. Again, with the presentation, you can just click on the link. Otherwise, just Google for it. You can put in your website, and it gives you a score whether your site is mobile-friendly or not.
This tool here has recently actually got a revamp. And it's really, really interesting for those of you who are using different CMS platforms.
Right, yeah.
It actually gives you specific tips whether you're using Blogger or WordPress or Wix or Weebly or any of these platforms. It says, on this platform, you should do X, Y, Z. Rather than just giving you a whole bunch of code that you need to, because not everybody is very tech savvy with writing HTML and CSS. A lot of us are using CMS platforms.
Right. No, absolutely. No, that's a really good tool. Absolutely. And emphasizing again this importance of mobile. For example, about 1/3 of all users in Google said that speed is the most important factor when using the mobile web. So again, emphasizing here, like speed of your site is another very crucial element. And about 74% actually said that they will abandon a mobile site if it doesn't fully load in 5 seconds. So you do you do the test on your own site and judge it for yourself. 3/4 say that they will leave your site if it isn't fully loaded in 5 seconds. Again, to address that issue, we have another free tool for you, which is called Page Speed Insights. Again, you can Google it. Basically, it's similar to the mobile site. You just enter your URL, and we'll give you a score, both for your desktop and for your mobile site, out of 100. And then, again, in addition to this, again, we will provide you with a couple of suggestions on what you could or should be doing to increase that score and make your site faster. I'm always asked by my partners, by my clients, like, so what is an ideal score, right? What should I aim for? Generally speaking, of course, we give you some sort of color coding already. So red obviously is not a good score, and orange is okay, green is better. But overall, I would say for a lot of the emerging markets, you should aim for around 70, right? In developed markets, maybe we normally say 80, 90, but I think for most of your markets, I think 70 would be a very good score already. Anything under that, you should definitely look at the recommendations and try to work on it together with your developers. Or if you can outsource it to a developer if you don't have to have your own developer. But it's really, really important. Speed is crucial when it comes to mobile.
Great. So that takes us to the end of our section 1, where we've gone over a few points about audience engagement. Really, the kind of questions that you have to help develop your site, bring more users to your site, make them more engaged. Now we're going to talk a bit on a different angle. We're going to talk about AdSense. So obviously, you're creating great content. You've got running costs. You want to take it to the next level, and you want to start making a living out of your content. So we're going to talk a bit about Google AdSense and how to get started. So bringing back again to what David was mentioning earlier about this ecosystem, this triangle of users, advertisers, and publishers. So as publishers, your number one concern is to your users, most likely at the moment. Placing ads on your site, you also have to take into account the concerns of advertisers. And we're going to go through some of those in our policy section as well, but just to keep that in mind. Now, obviously, we're quite biased, but we think that AdSense is an amazing product, and we want to give you some of the reasons why over 2 million publishers worldwide have chosen AdSense to monetize their site. First of all, you've got access to over 1 million Google advertisers. It means you don't have to interact with advertisers. You don't have to go, out there into the marketplace looking for advertisers. We bring the advertisers to your site. Only the highest paying ads go live. So we have real-time bidding, which means that there could be multiple advertisers bidding for space on your site at the same time through an automatic bid. and only the highest one will actually go onto your site. So a lot of people ask, why do I sometimes have a higher cost per click than other times? That's all down to advertisers and their demand. So we always give the highest paying ad that's available at that time. We serve the right ads for your audience. So it's obviously very important that your audience are seeing ads that are relevant to them. And we have a lot of intelligent algorithms in the back end that neither David nor myself fully understand. They're targeting your audience with the right ads that they'll engage with. And then the fourth piece that I think is crucial to you as you try to hold that user experience of your site is you're in control of the ads that appear on your site. There are numerous ways that you can control the ads. You can do it at an ad by ad level. You can do it at a domain level. You can do it at a category level. To choose the right kind of ads for your site. Now, one thing to be mindful of that is the more control you put over the ads, the less advertisers are there that want to be on your site. So that's one thing to keep in mind on that side. We're unsurprisingly with the highest quality advertising network, according to an external study done. And there's obviously a lot of reasons why users trust the Google Ad Network. It's family safe, so we'll talk about this later as well. We only allow ads on family safe sites, and we only allow family safe ads. When a user is engaging with a Google ad, they know that they're engaging with original content on the site that they're on. They get relevant advertising. Doesn't feel invasive. We don't allow things like pop-up ads. There's none of that on the Google Ad Network. We've got a 20% publisher acceptance rate. We're looking for policy-compliant publishers with great original content, and this is absolutely key to keep everything going. The quality of publisher that comes in has to be of a level that can keep the whole network engaging for users. And we've been developing this for a long time. It's been 12 years in the development. And here we have a little GIF that shows that shows what we're all about. Now we're going to go into some of the nitty-gritty of how AdSense actually works. So first of all, you select the kind of ad you want on your site. We've got text ads, display ads. There's rich media. There's link units. Got new types of ad formats like page level ads, match content, and there's a lot to choose from. We're going to go through some of the ones you should be going for first a bit later on in the presentation. But just to let you know that you can select the ad that you want on your site. The second part is you choose where you want the ads to appear. So it's completely up to you where you want the ads to appear, as long as they're compliant with all of the policies. Mm-hmm. But your own site has its own specific layout, and you'll want the ads to take particular places on your site. And then it's just sit back and watch the highest paying ads go live. That's really how simple it is. And then in terms of payment, we look after all the money stuff. We handle the process of billing advertisers and networks, and you earn money when ads are seen or clicked, depending on the type of ad.
Perfect. And just to go into a bit more detail on some of the things regarding AdSense before we then actually come to the optimization piece, which I'm sure you're all looking forward to. As Ocean already said, we're very, very keen on providing the right ads for your audience, so that they are right and relevant to your site, of course, when it's contextual ads, but also most importantly relevant, of course, for the users. So we have all sorts of different formats, sizes, and also types of ads that hopefully increase the engagement with the ads for your users and increase your revenues at the same time. Also, as I said, in terms of controls, Ocean already said you can choose a lot of things, including also colors, of course, sizes. You can set up different ad styles here as well. And with some of the new betas and test versions we have, we also came up recently in the last 6 months with a couple of very brand new formats, which we're going to also highlight in a little bit. So even in terms of sizes, you have much more control than before. And again, of course, you have real-time bidding. Advertisers have to compete for the highest ads. And I think in the Q&A, we're gonna I'm gonna highlight a little bit again on this whole issue about CPC versus RPM versus CTR, which it can be a little bit confusing because obviously advertisers, they bid in terms of CPC, but you as a publisher will be you're reported on an RPM basis. But at the end of the day, our system still decides the best paying ad based on all these three metrics actually for you as a publisher. And again, very important for us as well from an AdSense perspective. We've of course adjusted to this. It's very important to provide the right ads for the right screen. So we have things like the responsive ad units, which makes it much easier for you actually as a publisher to just implement one code, and we take care of deciding which ad size is the right ad size for the screen your user is accessing your website on at this particular time. So hopefully helping you a lot with optimizing your mobile revenues. And a couple of things that you just need to set up your AdSense account.
Yeah, so it's really quite straightforward. So you need a Google account, which a lot of people out there will have if you're using Gmail or any other Google service. So it's just a matter of going to the AdSense site. Obviously, we'll share a link, and your Google account will help you get started. You need to have content created from scratch. This is absolutely vital. So this is on your website or blog. You need to have your own content that you've created from scratch. And then your phone number and postal address, that's just so we can confirm who you are.
And I think actually, by the way, this is one step that often is forgotten. Like a lot of people have asked us in the past, and I think a couple of questions today around like, oh, I've registered for the account, but and I placed the test ads, but nothing is happening. You actually need to receive and confirm the PIN that we sent you. So therefore, the address, email, everything you provide of us needs to be correct, and we need to have received that PIN and confirmed the PIN for the ads to actually go live. So there's a lot of publishers actually where that's where the process stops. So please keep in mind you need to provide right postal addresses where you are able to receive posts and therefore receive the PIN.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, to a very, very important topic that I think a lot of you are keen on as well, or at least a lot of the questions address this. Before you obviously sign up or before you even start monetizing with it, so there's one element that is obviously very crucial to us and which always causes a lot of questions, which is our policies, AdSense policies. Number one, policies regarding even account creation, but also once you have the account, to ad implementation. So we're just going to highlight sort of the couple of the most important, I think about 7 of them, the most important policy guidelines for you to keep in mind that are very, very important and people often underestimate. First and foremost, of course, when you apply for an AdSense account, you need to obviously have your own website, right? So don't apply with another person's website or with a random URL or with some sort of funny URL of your own. You can see some examples for there on the right side. You must be the owner of the domain you want to monetize. Obviously, there are some rare cases where certain hosting partners might not allow AdSense for some technical reasons or whatnot, so make sure, of course, that's possible. But it's very, very important. You need to be the owner of your website. And by the way, once you register with that given URL, of course, you can add URLs later on. So you can monetize other URLs you own later on, but you have to register with one of the URLs you own in the beginning. Second important element as well, that is something that we come across now a few times, is you can't apply for an AdSense account before your site is even live. Because we, of course, need to check whether your site is genuine, whether your content is original, and so forth. So please only apply for AdSense once your site is fully live and the content is online as well, right? So that is very, very important. We get this quite a lot. So that is very important, because otherwise, we can actually, our computers, our systems can't check whether your site complies with all our policies. And obviously, once you apply and that might be rejected, then of course becomes more difficult to reapply. So really, please be sure of this.
And I think one part of that is parts of your site being under construction. So parts of your site under construction, links that lead to under construction, that's also a definite no-no. I think the easiest thing, if you're still building at some parts of your site, or you're building content in some areas, it's better just to hide those elements
Right.
until you're ready to roll out those particular areas, rather than leading to a
Right.
we're under construction. This section is coming.
Yeah.
Because that won't sit well with the policy team here.
Right. Yeah. Perfect. Number 3, again, a huge topic, and I know also a huge element of questions for today is regarding content. So especially in the emerging markets, we have a big issue often with unique content, and obviously unique content meaning content that you've created, that you didn't copy from somewhere else. Whether this is text actually, or whether it's images or videos, doesn't matter what type of material. Basically, you need to have created this content yourself. Now, there are obviously a couple of sort of gray areas, right? Obviously, we know that you cannot always be the first one to break a story. So the story might have been already written somewhere else or published somewhere else. What we're saying is not obviously that you can't write about a topic or a story that has been written somewhere else, but the problem we often see is that people literally copy-paste the text and title and even sometimes images from an existing site and posting on their own site, and then want to monetize that particular site. And that is obviously not allowed. And this is not something we want to encourage. At least we obviously don't tell you not to do it. I mean, obviously we don't control or tell you what you can publish on your site. That's very important to keep in mind as well. All we're saying is, when you do this, you're not allowed to use our product. But you can publish this, of course, as you wish. But that's very, very crucial. If you see a story you want to write about, try to rewrite the story yourself. Come up with your own wording, your own title, find pictures that you're allowed to use, or even try to, of course, get your own pictures ideally. But of course, you can write about other stories. Just make sure you actually write the text yourself. Do not duplicate, and also don't think that because maybe you've done it in the past, that we might not have noticed. This is also something to keep in mind. And you're surprised, and you say, no, I haven't done anything. Obviously, our systems detect when you duplicate content over time, but if it happens too much, of course, that's when you might run into trouble with our policy team. So please, very, very important for us. And fourth, very important, once you actually have the account, you implement your ads, is also something that we find sometimes that publishers think, oh, you know what, let me just slightly change the code or slightly implement something else because I want to be very cheeky. Again, it's something we detect, of course. When you create an ad unit and you get the code, do not tamper with the code in any way. Copy-paste the code as it is and paste it into your CMS, into your WordPress, Blogger tool, whatever you're using, but do not change the code in any way. Next, again, very, very crucial, and this is comes back to the ecosystem we explained earlier. So when we talk about family safe and legal content, meaning that if you publish a story about a car accident or a plane crash or something, and there are of course pictures maybe that are not necessarily family safe, we are not telling you not to publish the story, right? Again, because we have to think about the advertisers that are advertising with us. They don't want to see their own ad next to a dead body, or to a car crash, or to maybe there's a story about, sometimes we get this about prostitutes, or pictures about naked women or naked men. It's not that we're telling you this is not something you can publish, because other sites publish that as well. Our point is that we do not want our ads next to those posts, because we have to think about the advertisers paying for those ads. Nobody wants to see their brand associated with maybe a naked man or a naked woman. Okay, so let's keep this in mind. When you think about this triangle we showed you, we always have to think about all different players in the ecosystem. So please, when you have anything that is maybe slightly not family safe, or of course even worse, not legal, that's even worse of course, please just do not include our AdSense code. You can publish whatever you want, but please do not include AdSense on that particular site.
And I think the test to think about is the child-grandparent test.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's different cultural norms all over the world. We have global policy. We have a global policy on family safe and legal content. But the test for you would be: would you want your 6-year-old child or your grandparent? Would you be comfortable watching or reading this content with them beside you? So I think that's the quite straightforward test, and that's pretty universal in terms of how people interpret that test.
Yeah, absolutely. And then next one, limit ads per page. As you know, on AdSense there's a limit of 3 ads per page. So please also keep that in mind. This is now in relation to the users. We don't want to bombard users with ads because that's not a good user experience. It might be more money for you, but again, we have to think about users as well. So please stick to the limit of 3 ads per page. And then 6, very important, is in terms of navigation. Like oftentimes we see a slideshow of pictures, for example, and then there's a button for the next picture, and next to that button is actually an ad. So it's misleading oftentimes, and users might think the ad right now is actually the navigation or part of the site, or it's part of the article, and they click on it, but that actually creates click spam or accidental clicks. So again, very, very important, make sure that the ads are clearly, clearly visible and are not misleading in terms of your layout. This is also something, again, we detect, and if it happens too much, or if a policy isn't followed, then of course this could lead to consequences for your account as well. So very important, make sure your layout is very clear, what is an ad and what is content.
And this is also very important on mobile as well.
Right.
As you know, you're scrolling with your finger on your phone. It can be very easy to, if you're scrolling in navigational parts of the site, to accidentally click on an ad. So I suppose it's our duty altogether to make sure that users aren't being misled, and that users, if they're clicking on something, that it's going where they actually want to go.
Right, absolutely, yeah. And then last but not least is in terms of traffic. Again, very important, make sure you're fully aware of what's happening in terms of your traffic. Make sure you track it, of course. Google Analytics is a great tool to do this, of course. Your traffic should be organic. Please be aware that if you work with third-party providers, that they don't provide you with dodgy traffic. Again, this is actually a very serious case for us. If we detect any invalid activity, invalid traffic coming in, or bot activity on your site, your account might actually be suspended, or at least there will be policy warnings. So it's a very serious offense from our point of view. Please make sure that your strategies around traffic all evolve around, obviously increasing your status in terms of direct traffic, search, social, or referral. This is very important. Please be aware of where your traffic is coming from and stick to our policies. And then lastly, just a quick one. If this is obviously just a summary of the most important policies. If you want to know more about it, there are a couple of resources you can see here: Help Forum, Help Center. We have policy FAQs and also an AdSense blog we post regularly. So please make sure you check those out if you have more questions.
Great. So back to some of the steps that are involved in actually getting started with AdSense. So you've built your site's ready, it's complying with policies, and so a lot of great content on there. People are visiting it. So to get started with AdSense, the first stage is submit your application. So this is really straightforward. You need to have your URL ready and all of your details. The next step is to place the ads on your site, which we'll go through now in a moment. Then once you've placed the ads on your site, we review your account for approval. And then once your account's approved, ads will start displaying on your site. So that's an important point to note, that you put the code on your site, and actually it'll just show blank elements until we've reviewed the ads, and also that you've confirmed your PIN via phone or post. So there's obviously a few different CMS platforms out there that many of you I'm sure are using. One of them is Blogger, and Blogger, in my opinion, Blogger is probably the easiest platform to get going. Right within the user interface for Blogger itself, you have the Earnings tab where you can sign up for AdSense directly. Then in terms of setting up your first ads on Blogger, you've got a couple of steps there. It's really, really straightforward. You go to Layout, Edit, Show Ads Between Posts, hit Save, and there you go. I mean, it couldn't be any easier, really. Then another obviously very popular platform is WordPress. So there's actually an official plugin for WordPress. It's called Google Publisher. So you can find the link there. You can also find it in the WordPress plugin store. Again, very, very easy to use. It automatically places ads in different parts of your site, and you can change from the suggestions as well. Again, here's a few steps how to get set up. You can review these later when we send you on the materials, because I think with these things you really need to have your plugin open in the other tab when you're following the instructions.
Right.
Really.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But it's really quite straightforward, and the great advantage is there's no coding needed. If you're not using either of those platforms, typically this will be your process. You sign up, you create your ad unit. It generates some code that it shows you. You place it in the HTML source code, and then we're at the review stage there, and that's up to us then to review the site.
Yeah.
and obviously there's a lot more resources there where you can visit the Help Center. We'll show you really detailed step-by-step guides. And David's going to take you through now some tips once you've got going on maximizing your revenue, and actually some of the really useful tools to use as you get started in your first few days with AdSense.
Absolutely, yeah. It couldn't be easier, I think, to get started. And then the exciting thing, of course, once you get started, a couple of innovative things that I want to talk about now that maybe some of you might be aware of, but others, I'm sure, are not. I think I've mentioned this particular first one already in terms of responsive ad units, talking about the whole mobile and different device classes that we have nowadays, and who knows what's coming in the future. Again, something to look into, of course, in terms of creating responsive ad units, especially for things like for larger ad units, like, for example, the leaderboard. It's a very common one. You can imagine the 728 by 90 or 970 by 250 is great for a desktop site, but is absolutely useless for sometimes even tablet, but especially for mobile sites. So that particular ad unit is, for example, absolutely perfect for a responsive ad unit, where you can have where our systems will decide on the desktop, we might show the 728 by 90, but when it comes then to the mobile side, on that top same position, you also want to show an ad above the fold, of course, very important. But you then actually want to show the 320 by 100 on mobile. And for you not to have to, create two different ad units and then place the codes and have the code to know when device is, which device sizes and whatnot, you might as well just place a responsive ad unit code on the top position there, and we actually detect when to post what. And similarly, of course, on other ad units as well. So that's definitely one thing to keep in mind and to look into as a potential, to optimize your revenues.
And advertisers are bidding on all of these sizes all the time.
Oh, absolutely, because the sizes don't change, of course, right? That's absolutely true. The performance should stay the same or even get better because it's better for the users. It's more appealing for users. The second thing, again, actually addressing quite heavily the mobile space, are something called page-level ads. Now, this is a pretty new approach we have, and it might not be available to all of you, for those who have AdSense account at this point. We're still testing it a little bit in the background, but we're slowly launching it across the world, actually. And basically, page-level ads are two different types of ads. The first one is an anchor ad, which we'll go into a little bit, and the second one is a vignette ad, what we call. The nice thing about them, they don't count towards your 3 ads per page limit, and they only serve on mobile devices, high-end mobile devices, so really specifically focusing on the whole mobile focus in a lot of your markets at least. And also because we're testing it and it's a beta at the moment, we're actually capping especially the vignette ads on our end. So you don't have to worry about being very invasive to your users. We are capping those ad units on our end. I think at the moment around 2 to 3% of users will only see the vignette ads. But to go into a little bit more detail on what they are, pretty much the anchor ad, as the name suggests, is a normal mobile banner that will stick on the bottom of your page, so will be anchored at the bottom of your page. Even if your user scrolls your site, especially relevant for news sites, if you have a long article, for example, that ad unit will always be there at the bottom. But of course, if the user doesn't like it or doesn't want to see it, they can either click on the X that might show up, or they can swipe it away. So very easy to use for users. And we have seen a great experience for a lot of the publishers when it comes to engagement and click rates, of course, because it's just right there. But if they don't like it, they can move it away. So that's the first one.
And these ads are actually easier to implement than a
Absolutely.
lot of the other ad units. There's no placement. You literally just place the code between the head tags of your HTML.
Correct.
And then we'll serve the best ad. And that's
Correct.
That's
Yeah,
really
absolutely. The second
so
one,
straightforward.
just before we move on, the second one, the vignette ad, is actually a rectangle, basically a mobile medium rectangle, that will be showing between two different sites on your site. So sort of almost like a page takeover, if you want, or interstitial on mobile. But this one we're capping at about 3%. But it's definitely something to try out because RPMs are very, very high for this ad unit. So if you have page level ads on your account available at this point, please make sure to test them and really see what the performance is if it's something relevant for you. The next, of course, is coverage. I mean, needless to say, I think that, obviously try to optimize the number of ads you have. You have 3 ad units available. Make sure they're placed sort of on the most visited pages, coming back to analytics. Make sure you know where your users are. Again, if you're a news site, a lot of your traffic will be on the article pages rather than your home page, especially if you have search traffic. So make sure you have a very good implementation on the article pages. Make sure the ads are ideally above the fold. Again, this is obviously where most users will be. So those are a couple of things, of course, that you could look into in terms of coverage and really fully optimizing the number of ad units you have and also where you place them. Very, very, very important. Yeah, coming back to placements again, for example, if you are a news publisher again, you have an article page, you don't just want to have all 3 ad units, also relevant where you put them. So one important one, for example, is to put an ad close to or under the title, or close to the image, under the image. You really want to know exactly where your users are, where they're reading, because if I click on an article and your banner is on the very top of the page, as a user, I immediately will scroll down because I clicked on the article to read the article. Any ad on the very top or very bottom will hardly be seen. Even on the sidebar is only with limited success. The users will be in article. So this is where you ideally should place the ads in article for a news site. If you're any other site, obviously think about what are your users there to do, where's their attention, and that's where you want to place the ads. Again, within your AdSense, we talked about the control you have. And part of that control is actually that you can limit certain categories, you can limit or block ad networks or ad technologies, all within your AdSense account. Obviously, needless to say, try to be very cautious about it, because the more you block, whether it's categories or advertisers or / technologies, the lower, of course, the auction pressure will be. So the less, of course, opportunities the auction has to achieve very high RPMs for you. So the more you block, the lower your RPM will be, of course. We do know, of course, that there are certain instances where you really want to block a competitor of yours, for example, or there's a certain technology you really don't want on your site. So that's fine, or maybe certain sensitive categories you really don't want to show on your site. That's absolutely understandable. But overall, we would say, be careful of how much you block. And all these settings you can actually see under the Ad Review Center within your AdSense account on the top navigation. But just be careful of that. Right, and just before that, maybe one last point from my end also, just overall, make sure you really fully familiarize yourself with the performance report in your AdSense. A lot of times, there are very good statistics provided in your AdSense account, and when I talk to a lot of my clients, and I'm sure Raj confirmed this, and Ocean as well, they're very simple, in quotation marks, simple optimization tips you can already derive from just really understanding your data that you already have in your AdSense account. One very basic example. A lot of my publishers in Sub-Saharan Africa, for example, have a lot of traffic from the diaspora, so from America, Canada. Let's say you're a Kenyan publisher. A lot of Kenyans in America are looking at your site. Now, those users are much more valuable for you because the RPMs are higher. So you want to maybe try and really focus on this diaspora traffic, right? The RPMs are 4 to 5 times higher for a Kenyan looking at your site from America rather than a Kenyan in Kenya. So you want to tailor your content maybe, or really, focus on those users to increase your revenues. And this is information that is provided to you already in AdSense. So I really encourage you today, if you haven't done this, or if you feel like you haven't done it enough after this hangout, go and sit down for the next hour if you can, really fully understand the performance reports, all the different options you have there, see where you can already identify certain opportunities. This is something I think that where you should start at.
Great. That's I hope everybody found that useful. That's some really great tips on how to get your site really generating revenue once you get started. This is a quick sum up of what we've talked about. Obviously, we went through policies, we went through the sign-up process, how to create ad units, whether it's Blogger, WordPress, or another system. And then we went through David's top tips for maximizing revenue as well. We're gonna jump straight into some questions here.
Great, yeah.
We're gonna get Raj back in. Raj, are you still there?
Yep, I'm here.
Perfect. I hope everybody can hear Raj as well. As I said, Raj is our sort of equivalent in India, so he's the partner manager and AdSense expert for India. So he's also going to help us out with some of the questions. Because we started late, we're going to do. I think we have another at least 10 to 15 minutes now for questions. I hope that's okay and everybody can stay. If I just want to address, because we've looked at some of the questions. I think overall, and there are a few themes I think coming out. One question or one topic I just want to address up front first. A lot of the questions are around CPC, RPM, CTR, and whatnot. So I just want to quickly sort of clarify this. Obviously, so the RPM is obviously the price that you as a publisher is being paid for your impressions on your site. And the RPM is calculated by the CPC times the CTR, right? So the CPC is part of the RPM. Now, CPC, cost per click, is what on the advertising side the advertisers pay for that particular image. And the CTR, of course, the click-through rate, is how the percentage of users that have clicked on any given ad unit. Those two together determine the RPM that you are seeing in your AdSense account. This is really what you should focus on. Also means that you don't have any influence on CPC. So some of the questions, for example, you know, I've seen the CPC drop in my country on my account. How can I change that? You can't, right? The CPC, unfortunately, and we've seen some markets, for example, Nigeria is one example, that have seen some drops in CPC recently, but that is obviously due to some macroeconomic situations in the market, or maybe there's a certain trend in the advertiser ecosystem that is determining this particular drop or this change. But you as a publisher can't really directly influence the CPC. What you can influence, of course, is CTR. So you can look into maybe if there are certain strategies that you can implement, or certain ad unit, you change the size, change the placement, that might increase the CTR, which in turn potentially could increase the RPM. But the measure that you really as a publisher should focus on all the time is really the RPM. That is really for you the determining factor. And this is also, by the way the system selects the best ads. So that our system, our algorithm, select the best ads in terms of the RPM for you, right? Because it obviously takes into account click rates. So this is maybe, I hope this at least will answer several of the questions that have been dropped now. But yeah, very important to keep in mind, as a publisher, focus on the RPM, the either impression or page RPM.
Absolutely. Now we're gonna start really going into the questions here. We've got one question coming up now. Let me present it here on the screen. Oh, it looks like
there was one before Ashwin puts it up. I think there was one other question that a lot of you seem to have sort of felt was important. By the way, if you see any other questions and you think this is something we should answer, make sure you like it, because that will pop it up to the top and we will answer them. But one of the questions was if you are allowed to use any third-party provider within Blogger. And I mean, at the end of the day, of course, I mean, you know, you're free to integrate any third-party code. You know, there are certain options of just copy-pasting HTML code or certain things. So in theory, there's no policy on our end that prevents you from doing that. You know, I mean, we believe strongly in AdSense. We believe it is the best product at the end of the day when you think about the volume and the reach it has. But if you feel you want to try something else, absolutely. There's no policy, at least, that prevents that. Just make sure you look at performance, of course, and really compare the two properly. But yeah, so that's fine.
So the first, I mean, I'm trying to get the questions up on screen to help us read them here. So the first question is, how does Google decide on when there is sufficient content?
Right.
Is there a rough guide as to what determines sufficient content?
Right.
Raj, do you want to come in on this question?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So that's a good question. First of all, something I would ask myself here is, even though I might have a lot of content in terms of text or images, is the content, first of all, quality content? Is this something that advertisers would be willing to place their ads next to? So it's just not a matter of the number of words that you have or the amount of content that you have. Sometimes it also means, is this content quality, and is this something the advertisers would like to place their ads next to or be associated with? So that's also something very important to consider. David and Ocean, if you want to add in anything. I think you guys are on mute, actually.
Good point. We're on mute.
No, 100% agree, Raj. I think that's a very good summary. You know, there are no clear guidelines, but yeah, just step back for yourself and think about it. Absolutely, yeah.
So we have a question here. Can we host third-party ads on Google Blogspot?
Yeah, that was the one I think just in the beginning when you were trying to sort out. That was the one. Exactly. So yeah, as I said, that's absolutely fine.
I have another question.
Some of them I think are relating also to what any minimum requirements for AdSense. I hope we've answered this before in terms of page views, impressions. So there are no minimum requirements per se. So in terms of page views you need to have or impressions you need to have, that is not a reason why we might not approve an AdSense account or disapprove it or whatnot. It really just depends on all the other things we mentioned, whether you've provided the right information, you have good content, and so forth, and you've actually confirmed the PIN, and you've implemented the ads on the side. Those are the things we need to be able to determine whether to approve or disapprove an AdSense account. So there's no limit or minimum threshold that you need to achieve.
We've got another question here coming from Clinton. I have a blogspot account on sport betting in Nigeria of over 1,000 traffic daily. Please, how do I monetize my blog?
Right. So there's again, coming back to some of our internal policies that we as a company have to take or have to decide on. In as much of course, betting pages themselves is not a problem, and I'm sure a lot of us have maybe used them in the past. But we as a company, because we have to think about our users, there might be kids surfing as well. There's all sorts of issues, and unfortunately at the moment we do not allow to show out the ads on betting pages, just because they are obviously from an advertiser perspective, coming back to our ecosystem, certain advertisers do not want to see their ad next to a betting page, whereas it might be misleading for if there are teenagers or kids on there. So that's the unfortunate thing at this point. At least we haven't found a solution for this really, but at the moment we don't allow monetizing betting pages, just because of that aspect. We have to think globally. Every policy we have is a global policy, has to apply to all countries in the world, and we have to be very cautious that we don't run into problems with the advertisers, and also the users, of course, don't complain, and certain ads could be misleading.
I'm just looking for some of our questions here.
One question that I came across, which was interesting and which is always a commonly asked question, is what happens if my account doesn't meet a policy or gets disabled? As David and Ocean mentioned, there's AdSense Help Center, which they mentioned earlier. Please do take a look at the Help Center. There's an option for you to go through all our program policies. So do take out some time to sit back and go through all of them so that you don't end up violating any of the policies. And in case inadvertently you do, just make sure to appeal. There's an appeals section where you can contact us and get in touch with us and just bring up the points that you feel you inadvertently sort of violated any of the policies. And it will get addressed shortly, and we'll get back to you. There's a team dedicated to sort of answering and getting back to you on that, and just clarifying why there was a policy violation and how you can fix it.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that appeal is very important. In the message you will receive, you can actually appeal against it. That's absolutely true, Raj. And in that line, actually, there's another topic that I've seen in Sub-Saharan Africa, for example. A lot of people ask, here, there's no support. We can't really contact anybody. When I go for meetings there, they say this is the first time I'm meeting anybody from Google. There is actually, so in the Help Center on the top right corner, there is a Contact Us button. And there you can also select the different topics you need, or the concerns you have, or the questions you have. And you can actually reach our support team, even if you don't have, or ideally even mostly when you don't have any policy issues, on a more positive note. If you have any other questions regarding anything, don't despair. Don't think like, there's no way to contact Google. There's actually the Contact Us button where you can send an email. In some markets, there are some other options as well, but definitely the basic is an email that will be sent all over the world to our support teams, whether this is in India, whether this is in Egypt, whether this is in South Africa or whatnot. So please, if you have any questions relating to AdSense, make sure to go to the AdSense Help Center, to the Contact Us button on the right top corner, and submit your question there. It might not be within the first 24 hours, depending on the sort of amount of questions we get in, but be sure that in a couple of days, you will get an answer. So please make use of this, because some markets we've really seen a very low usage of it. So we don't know whether there's people that know about it. But please make sure to use this for any sort of questions you might have, and one of our colleagues will answer that.
We have another question here about approvals. Is Google AdSense team going to give second chance to disabled AdSense users? If you give a second chance to those publishers who are banned for more than 1 year, will become more honest publishers. If this is around your account being disapproved, you can reapply. You can reapply for AdSense again. Just one thing: make sure you actually use the same email address and the same domain when you're reapplying again. Yeah. Because if these aren't the same, then it's a red flag in our system for somebody now trying with a different website.
Right. Yeah.
If the first one didn't get through.
Because you're only supposed to you're only allowed to have one AdSense account per URL, email, or so forth, right?
Yeah. So follow the tips that we've gone through today. We've gone into some pretty detailed advice on getting your site set up. So really make sure, like, pay attention to all those and really make sure that you're ready, and then reapply again. You should receive a link in the email that you received telling you about the approval process.
Absolutely, yeah.
Raj, did you see any other questions that that catch your eye there?
One last one probably is in terms of specific languages, like for example Hindi and Bengali and some of these languages. So Hindi, for instance, is already launched. So if you have a Hindi website, you can implement ads on them. One thing to note, however, is like when ads are being placed next to Hindi content, it's not just the contextual targeting. So it's also other form of ad placements. So that still needs to be considered. And also some of the other languages which is still not unsupported. There's a lot of work which goes into supporting AdSense for these languages. So at this point of time, some of the languages are unsupported, but as in when we end up supporting them, you will be obviously notified of those languages.
Absolutely, and maybe one other quick one. It's a question, but more broadly about the topic of certain policies maybe that you have a problem with, and then you always of course go to see other sites, or you look at your competitors, you look at the sort of examples you're looking up to. Just important to keep in mind that don't try to compare yourself to any other site, because every site is different, of course. And there's some questions here. Look, I'm seeing this particular apparent violation on this site. Just because maybe there's an ad still currently on that site doesn't mean that we're not necessarily aware of it, or we're not investigating, or there's nothing happening in the background. Also, of course, keep in mind that the web is massive. We all know how many websites come up every day, how many websites we have to check every day. So, of course, we can't be 100% up to date all the time, but just important, really focus on your own site. Any of those comparisons, won't really help or work. You say, oh, but this site can use it, so I'm expecting to use it as well. Just to encourage you to really focus on your own site. Make sure your site is clean. Make sure your site is working according to our policies, at least, if you want to use AdSense. And be sure that we're working very hard all the time to make all our publishers policy compliant. And if they're not, that we will be following up with them eventually. Just to keep that in mind.
Great. I think that's all we have time for in the questions. A lot of really great questions that we didn't get to as well. We'll really have a look at them, and we'll see if we can answer some of them via email or a blog post.
Absolutely.
We will follow up afterwards to everybody who came in and attended live. We'll send you on the resource. We'll send you on the presentation, including all those links that you can go to take action on a lot of the things that we've spoken about today. Perfect.
And make sure, please, to look out for more of these Hangouts on Air. We're really trying to come up with different contents. If you have any maybe questions or any requests for other topics, let us know. Also, make sure to check out the YouTube channels. We have a lot of videos actually on YouTube about Google AdSense, different short videos about different topics. Make sure to also sign up for the AdSense blog. And follow us on Google Plus and whatnot. Really make sure to look out for a lot of those resources and other sessions we're going to do, and hopefully help you even further to grow your revenues.
Okay, great. Yeah, and with that, I think we'll wrap up. Thanks again, Raj. Thanks, Raj, for joining in.
Thank you, guys, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Okay.
All the best, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.